Brew Strong is brought to you by Blickman Engineering, home of the top-tier brewing stand. Visit them online at blickmanengineering.com.
Brewers, it's time for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think, Jamil and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
Hey, howdy. Hey, my brewing brothers and sisters.
Greetings.
Back for another lovely session of Brew Strong.
Indeed. I think we have a special guest this time.
Special meaning...
Well, you
limited?
know, impaired.
I consider Scott a friend, not a guest.
Wow. Show by show, I'm improving.
You are. You're still...
Yeah, you're not normal anymore, Scott. You are special.
I don't know how to take that, so I'll just take it as a compliment. Thanks. My mom always said the same thing.
Yes. You're special.
Special.
Son, you're special. Like our special friend, John Blickman.
Blickman Engineering, yes.
BlickmanEngineering.com.
Does Blickman have a son?
No.
He's got daughters.
He does.
Yes.
I wonder, do you think anyone calls their son any longer? Is that a vestige of the past? I missed that. I never got called son.
I would call my son son.
Would you?
I'd be like,
I do.
Son.
You do, John?
Yeah.
Oh, good man.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's... You can't say daughter.
Right. That's why I was asking about Blickman.
You know, if there was an equivalent word for daughter, like there is son, you know, a single syllable where you can kind of drag it out and you can go, son, you know, you can use that.
Son.
Yeah, you know, you can use that to effect. You can't do daughter. You know, it just doesn't sound right.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, you know, but son, that works. Or you can get son. You know, that's a useful tool right there.
Yeah.
Teach your kid to do the gangster talk. What's up, son?
Son?
I'm talking about like the beaver cleaver type thing. You know, son, you put a hand on the shoulder, you impart some life advice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I impart the life advice to the daughters, just like John Blickman does to his daughters. Although I'm not sure it's good advice that he's giving them. It would be John Blickman advice, and that could be. I don't know.
It may be appropriate for Indiana.
No. I would say it's inappropriate for even internet radio. You know, some of the advice he gives. I don't know if you were walking with him when we were going to dinner at CBC.
No.
But there are some things that man says that I just got to I do a double take and make sure it was John that said them. You know, just like, did he really just say that? And I know he thinks he can say these things to me because I have talked about my avocado-sized testicle. I've talked about, so many
spots.
things. My white spots. I've talked about so many things, and have really, opened the kimono. So I think he thinks he can say these things to me without offending me, and he can really just really cut loose. So he does. I'll tell you what, he also cuts loose on fine engineering and making great homebrew.
He does not hold anything back.
He doesn't.
That is
he doesn't.
true.
He puts all his passion and his love right into that equipment. You can sometimes see the stains. I'm just telling you. You got to check out BlickmanEngineering.com. Great people. I love hanging out with the Blickman folks because it's all a bunch of really bright people that are passionate about what they do. And very cool to hang out with them. They're going to all be at the Homebrewers Conference in June in San Diego.
Definitely.
So you gotta go check them out. Go see them at their booth. Hang out with them. You'll realize how much fun and how knowledgeable they are. So they've been sponsoring the show for a long time, the least you can do is stop by and say thank you. All right. Show for today is going to be on, we need to get right to it because I know, Neil, there's going to be a ton. We've got our special guest, our good friend, Neil Spake. He's been, he did Can You Brew It with us. He's done Brew Strong with us. He's done it all with us. He's very knowledgeable on everything like Scottish brewing and English brewing. He's spent a lifetime of passion and a lot of air miles going over there and learning about it. So he's going to talk to us today about Parti-Gyle Brewing and specifically how it's done at Fuller's and how he does it himself and some of the ways. We covered Parti-Gyle before, and we did okay. Neil says we did a solid job on it, but I think there's more that we can learn. I think it's of interest to a lot of brewers. Neil, you there with us?
Yep, I'm here.
Was that an
Thanks for having me.
Was that an adequate intro for you, Neil?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much.
Mm-hmm.
Neil's a great guy. We have hung out before. He went to GABF with us, and we had a good time. All right. Talk to us about Parti-Gyle. Now, give us a little brief historical background on Parti-Gyle and the process and that.
What does Parti-Gyle actually mean?
Well, Parti-Gyle means multiple gyles, basically. A gyle in old Victorian Britain was basically a batch of beer. So Parti-Gyle was multiple beers from one mash, basically. And it was invented by the Victorians in the 18th century, and mostly just like everything else in the Industrial Revolution, to get the most out of their ingredients, to get the maximum extract from the barley, as well as full utilization of their equipment. They were masters in building factories that were very efficient at that time. So what they would do was they would mash in, let the barley convert, then they would fill the tun the rest of the way with liquor, so they didn't sparge. They just topped up, and then they ran off into what they call a copper, a kettle, and these were called the first runnings. And then once they got that kettle filled, they would fill the tun up again, let it sit for a little bit to convert whatever might be left, run that copper or that wort off into the second copper. And in some cases, they would fill it up a third or even a fourth time. I have some Scottish historical records where they actually did do 4 mashes. And they would use the third runnings for really weak beers. So when they did this, obviously, you get the strongest extract in the first wort. And so that's what they would use for a strong ale. The second would be their standard or normal bitter. And then the third would be table or wheat beer. If you read some of Randy Mosher's classic Brewer's Companion, he goes through this in some detail and kind of gives some rules of thumb for how you can figure out what the extract split would be when you're doing this method. I find it really complicated, and that's why I kind of look more towards how Fuller's does it now. But he recommends that you either use a 1/3, where the first third of the runnings is the strong wort, and it's twice as strong because half of your extract comes from the first third. But again, I think this is not an exact thing. It's a rule of thumb. And he also gives some explanation for splitting it 50-50, where he gives a table so that you can kind of figure out volume-wise what kind of gravity you could expect. I got the most of this information back when I did the interview with Fuller's for the Can You Brew It shows. And just prior to talking to John Keeling, their head brewer, about the recipes themselves, I sat down with him and spent probably 20 minutes talking about their Parti-Gyle process, and that's where most of this information comes from. So what John told me was that sparging was actually discovered by the Scots, and they adopted it at Fuller's somewhere around 1880 from what he can tell in their records. So that was the move to just what we know brewing as today. You mash in, You don't top up, but you sparge, and you run off again. But again, originally, they just would mash it, sparge it, run it off into the first copper, and then do the same thing, sparge it a second time to get whatever was left in there. And then they would blend those beers to get the types of beers that they wanted. And then he said, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say blending wort or blending fermented beer?
They blend the wort, yeah. They blend the wort.
I believe in this case they blended the wort. We'll get to the beer part in a little bit.
Okay.
Because it's done differently today. Then, obviously, he said, just like every other brewery, that wasn't enough output. So now they implemented 2 mash tuns, and they would mash the same recipe at the same time and run them both off into a copper, and then they would sparge the second time in both of those to get another copper and boil it. And again, it was just to get the most out of this equipment and the ingredients. And he did make a comment that he had visited the Guinness Brewery in London sometime before it closed, and at that time they had 9 mash tuns doing this style of brewing. And as far as I know, Fuller's is the only commercial brewery left in the world that uses the Parti-Gyle method. So that's pretty much the historical basis of it.
All right. Let's do this. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, I want to hear more about what they're doing today at Fuller's that's different than what they did in the past, and how that compares.
Okay.
All right. Let's do that. Let's take a short break. We'll be back right after this.
Tonight is the night.
We bring the creature to life, Dr. Blickmanstein?
Yes, J.P. Gore. Everything is perfect for my next fermented creation.
But, Roger, the storm is too far away. We'll never have enough power to isomerize the creature's alpha acid.
Yes, J.P. Gore, we will. For I have in my possession the Tower of Power.
Blickman's new Tower of Power is the evolution of automation. Control hot liquor, sparge, and mash temps like a pro. The Tower of Power is a high-quality gas-fired rim system that works with your current brewing setup. With ultra-precision, the tower can hold your mash to 1/2 of a degree Fahrenheit. Precision and repeatability. The Tower of Power is the answer to automatic, fast ramp times. See more at BlickmanEngineering.com. Bring your next creation to life with the Tower of Power.
Dr. Blickmanstein, with the Tower of Power, you can probably give me an afternoon at the pub to enjoy a pint.
Don't be silly, J.P. Gore. We have beer to brew.
When I order a beer, I want my server to know more about it than I do. I want someone who enjoys good beer and loves helping others enjoy it too. I want someone who knows how to pour a perfect pint for every beer style. I want a Cicerone.
The Cicerone Certification Program is creating the type of people who help you enjoy great beer. Home brewers and craft beer lovers know beer is more flavorful and complex than ever, and it takes some serious knowledge to store and serve beer right. Cicerones know beer. There are 3 levels in the Cicerone program: Certified Beer Server, Certified Cicerone, and Master Cicerone. Cicerones are truly the sommeliers of beer. The best beer locations have a Certified Cicerone on staff. Relaxed and unpretentious. Cicerones are tested on storing and serving beer, beer styles, flavor and tasting, the brewing process and ingredients, and pairing food with beer. Learn more about your next beer guide at cicerone.org. Certified Cicerone, because it takes top talent to present a perfect pint.
The National Homebrew Conference is coming up this summer, and More Beer wants to send you. To celebrate 20 years of serving homebrewers, More Beer is giving away 2 full pass registrations to the 2015 National Homebrew Conference, June 10th through 13th. That's right, 2 full passes, full access to all the presentations, club night, and pro brewers night, 2 seats to the grand banquet and awards ceremony, 2 one-year membership gift cards to the American Homebrewers Association, 4-night stay at the beautiful Town and Country Resort, round-trip air airfare to and from the San Diego airport, 2 VIP passes to the Brewing Network's own anniversary party, a $250 prepaid Visa gift card for food and your other expenses, and dinner with the More Beer crew. Visit morebeer.com for all the details and to enter. You can enter once a day through April 15th, and the winner will be drawn on April 25th. If you've already purchased your registration to the event and seats to the grand banquet, those fees can be refunded. Enter today at morebeer.com.
BN Army, I'm here to talk seriously for a second. You all are partially responsible for something explosive, and it's time you answer for it.
Moonlight Meadery is exploding.
Yeah, exploding across the country. Wait, they just landed in Australia with insane quality meads.
With nearly 70 different varieties of mead on the market, Moonlight Meadery has blown up the mead category and completely reinvented it.
Seriously? What? Seriously. What? You're paying money for that watered-down mead when you could have a Moonlight mead?
Moonlight meads explode with quality and flavor.
They're a party in a bottle.
Did someone say party?
If you want mead and want the best, you want meads from Moonlight Meadery and will accept nothing less.
And now get 15% off by going to moonlightmeadery.com/BNArmy and use coupon code BNArmy at checkout.
Hey, sign me up for that party.
Back to the two guys that know how to turn beer into beer. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. We're talking Parti-Gyle Brewing with our good friend Neil Spake, who's a bit of an expert on traditional Scottish and English brewing techniques. Been to Fuller's a number of times. Wants to do interviews for us for Can You Brew It, which turned out incredibly successful. Neil, so you were talking about historically how Parti-Gyle was done at Fuller's, and you hinted at they're doing something different today. I mean, the multiple mash tuns, but how else does the process differ today?
Okay, today, as John clearly clarified in the historical side, the Fuller's process today involves blending beers. They do the blending after the boil.
Uh-huh.
So that brings some new things you have to think about. But John was pretty adamant when I was there to make sure that everyone understood that he's not talking about like some of the big three brewers that do a high gravity and then they water it down to get it to the right extract. That's not what they do. They actually blend the wort from each of these after they've been boiled with hops.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they can do, he described in tons of detail, I've got some other notes, where they do either 2 beers or 3 beers at a time. So they roughly have 4 beers that they do this way. One is their Golden Pride, which is about an 8.5%, basically an English barley wine.
Mm-hmm.
Fuller's ESB, which we heard about on the show. London Pride, which is their standard bitter. And then Chiswick bitter, which you can't get in America, that was Michael Jackson, not the hee-hee, but the real Michael Jackson. His favorite.
Don't make fun of us skin-challenged people.
Hey, just because he has vitiligo doesn't make him worthy of being made fun of, man.
Yeah.
God.
You are not allowed to make fun of us people. I'm just saying.
I had to throw that in there after the last show. I just had to. So anyway, those are the beers they brew with this method.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked.
So they're running them off in these different strains. They are fermenting them in these different strains, and then they blend the beers to get their various strains. They're still doing the Parti-Gyle mashes, fermenting those and blending them.
No, let me clarify that. When I say beer, I mean wort that's been boiled with hops.
Yes.
They blend the beers prior to fermentation.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we don't call them beer until we got yeast in them.
Okay. Well, I call them beer because they have hops. That's
right.
an old traditional thing.
Okay.
So, yes, thanks for the clarification.
Yep,
They blend these beers prior to fermentation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Right.
So, like I said, on the homebrew scale, I've done this a few times, and you can easily do something like a Fuller's ESB and and the low gravity Chiswick bitter really easily in a nice 15-gallon Blickman Boilermaker mash tun, if you've got a couple boil kettles that can handle it. So the way they do this is they calculate what beers they're going to brew for that day, and so let's say it's those 2 beers. They get the individual recipe for each of those beers, and they add up all the ingredients. So the grain for ESB plus the grain for Chiswick bitter goes in the mash tun. The whole thing gets mashed. That's why when they do the second runnings, I don't really call them second runnings, because you've already accounted for the fact that this is 2 beers. So, yeah, they're lower gravity when they come out, but you did it with the intent knowing you're going to blend some of the higher gravity stuff in with it to get it to the gravity you want. So after that, I asked him about hopping. So the grain is pretty straightforward. Just add it together and mash the grain and then run it off into two barrels, coppers. The hopping, they treat differently because the higher gravity wort obviously will extract bitterness at a different utilization than the lower gravity. So I don't think there's any exact science to this, but what they do is they take the total amount of bittering hops in quantity, and they put the 2/3 of it in with the high gravity beer and boil it for 60 minutes, and 1/3 in the low gravity beer and boil that for 60 minutes. So where they get that, I don't know. And I do have a note here because I'd asked him, and I think this was in the Brew Strong shows. I always ask, well, what percentage of the total hop rate do you account for bittering? And they target about 80% of their IBU goes in for the bittering content.
Well, I wonder. It's almost. I think a lot of times when you're guessing at something or when you're doing something, there's this natural order to the world.
Yeah,
and
I think you're right.
And sometimes when you're like, well, we're getting 2/3 of our extract and 1/3, and it just becomes like, well, we'll do a 2/3, 1/3 in the hops. I think that it just kind of makes some sort of natural sense and seems to work out. I don't think there's anything more complex than that.
Right.
That's logical.
Yeah, and they've been doing it for hundreds of years. So.
Right.
So obviously, if you're thinking of this from a home brewer's perspective, that it does constrain you to both beers having the same bittering profile and in most ways the same flavor and aroma. Because if you were to drastically late hop one or the other, you really have to keep conscious of, well, what happens when I blend these beers? If I use different hop character for the flavor and aroma additions, what's going to happen when I blend them? So they use the exact same hop mix in all 4 of these beers.
Well, and could you do your blend and then dry hop one, not dry hop the other, use some different hops?
Great question, and that's exactly what we found out with the ESB. They dry hop the ESB in the fermenter. They dry hop it again in the conditioning tank, and then in the cask version gets dry hopped when the cask leaves the factory. And Chiswick bitter is the same way. It doesn't get any dry hops in the fermenter or in the conditioning vessel, but it does get dry hopped on the way out the door, and it does lend a really nice character to that low gravity beer. Now that's the place where if you're not trying to clone, you could do something different at those stages if it made sense to make those beers a little more unique.
Right. Blending the worts really, really kind of, ties you into that one character, because if you were not blending the worts or the beers, you could run one off, and then you can throw in some crystal malt, some black malt, things like that, and then run the second one off, and you can change it up that way. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's whether you do it with the old method or the sparging method, that is the essence of of what we classically know as Parti-Gyle Brewing.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly the type of things they do. And I didn't bring that up too much here because I think you guys covered that pretty well in the last show.
Mm-hmm.
This is just a little bit different take on that I thought was really interesting for how they do this.
Right.
It is, yes.
Well, and how does the math work on this? I mean, do you have some pointers for folks on how they should, calculate this, or 'cause that's the big problem people come across. They're like, okay, I want to do this. I see an opportunity for me to load up my mash tun and get myself 15 gallons of beer, three different beers, all off of one mash. I'm going to save myself a bunch of time. I'm going to utilize my ingredients fully. Hit me with some math.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of people look at it and give up, I think.
Yeah.
But I took a very practical, straightforward approach, and I don't know if it helps doing this a few times, but I just basically created a spreadsheet, and you catalog. So basically when you're done boiling, you've chilled your beers down, you measure the gravity in each one, and you put that gravity in the spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. So you've got a high gravity wort, you got a low gravity wort to work with, and then you just kind of play with the numbers. You take that gravity. So like if the first wort was 1.060, I know you discussed Plato. I work in original gravity. I'm one of the old guys. So if I'm thinking 1060 in gravity points, I would just drop that 1.0 and just say 60 points of gravity in the high gravity beer. Mm-hmm. And then you multiply that times the number of gallons of that beer you're going to put in that particular beer. Mm-hmm. So if I have a high gravity beer and a low gravity beer, I'm going to put X percent of high gravity wort times 60 to give me a number of points, and X gallons of low gravity wort, say in this case it was 22, and you just add those together and you play with the volumes in the spreadsheet. It's not complicated. It's pretty much just straightforward Excel. Volume times gravity potential. And then when you add up the total points for each, and you know the batch size you want to hit, then your total points divided by your batch size for an individual beer will give you the gravity of that beer.
So, in other words, you've got these two sources of wort. You've got a high gravity and you got a low gravity. And so you've made these beers before. You know how much points you're going to get. And what you're saying is combine those two malt bills, right, into one mash tun. You're going to run these out into a high gravity wort and a low gravity wort. Then you're looking at your high gravity wort's too high. Blend in some low gravity wort to your 5.5 gallon batch to get where you want. And then the remainder is going to be your low gravity beer, and it's mainly low gravity wort with a little high gravity wort added in, and that's going to give you your other 5.5 gallons of wort. And there's your two beers, right? And so
that's exactly right.
You make a spreadsheet that does that, or you could do it with 3 beers. You could make one that's more high gravity, and then a little of the high gravity goes in with some of the 50-50 with the low gravity, and then the last one's all low gravity, and there you've got 3 beers now.
Absolutely, yeah. And you don't even have to keep the same volume size. If you wanted to do like an English barley wine and a standard bitter and then some real low gravity bitter, maybe your barley wine is only 2.5 gallons or 2.75 gallons of the whole thing. Mm-hmm. But it all still comes down to the math. You're absolutely right. You got 3 worts. You know what gravity you want in the beer. You just figure out the percentage volume you want. Mm-hmm. So as an example, I'll just give a quick example. About 3 weeks ago, I brewed London Pride and Chiswick Bitter. So that's their standard and their low gravity bitter together. And I was shooting. I brew like a 13-gallon batch, hoping to get 6 gallons or so for each batch. With losses, because I have quite a bit of loss. But what it worked out to basically was for London Pride, which is about a 1047, 1048 beer, 3 3/4 gallons of the high gravity and 1 3/4 gallons of the low gravity. And when I measured them blended, it was dead on. And so with the other one, surprisingly, because it doesn't always work out this way, the other one was just the flip side. It was 1 3/4 gallons of the high gravity wort and 3 3/4 of the low gravity to get me the 1034 that I wanted for the Chiswick bitter.
I'm a big fan of
off the fermentation.
Yeah. So you boil.
Oh, I know.
You boil it.
It's a brilliant beer.
You add your hops, and ferment. You can add dry hops, things like that. You can have a lot of creativity with something like that.
Yeah.
You could even mess with the extract in the kettle. You could add I imagine you could do Parti-Gyle Belgian ales. And
I'm sure, yeah.
Add some candy sugar to one and not to the other. You could, there's a lot of things you could do with this kind of technique, and I think it really lends itself well to the home brewer. I don't think it lends itself well to a lot of commercial breweries because I think you have to be set up for it. But on the homebrew scale, I think you can play with this a lot and have a lot of interesting things in it, and you can get multiple beers from one mash, which is really very neat. And I think a lot of times people are thinking, well, it's not, they're thinking it's just one standard mash. And what you're saying is, add together the ingredients for multiple beers into that mash.
Yes.
And use that.
And I think that makes a big, big difference because I was judging at the Cerveza Fest in San Antonio last year, and we were doing English Mild. And we ran across one, the guy I was judging with. I said, that's a second runnings beer. Well, what do I mean by second runnings beer? Well, that's the old-style Parti-Gyle, and you can taste the additional graininess and stuff in the beer. That doesn't happen so much with this because of what you just said. You're taking two recipes and adding them together. So you're really mashing both recipes at the same time. There really is no second runnings per se because you're blending them. You're mashing with the intent of blending when you're finished.
Right.
And I totally agree. I think it's really, really a neat system, and the sky's the limit. You're right. You could brew just about any kind of styles this way.
Well, and the problem with the other method is you end up with a second runnings beer that's tannic, grainy, thin, lacking in body.
Right.
Right.
And you don't have that with this method.
No.
All right. That's good stuff. Let's take another short break. I think it's our last short break, yes? Oh, no, we got one more after this. Oh, my God. So we need to take a break. And
got to pay the bills.
Maybe we can get some questions from the chat room or something.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll be back right after this.
Nico, listen, our lawyers said that we had to do this for 1 hour, and after this, we don't have to talk to each other for 3 more months to the next meeting.
Kids, come on, let's get out of here.
I'm supposed to have more lines. I'm the professional. Hey, it's Sully.
And I'm Nico.
And we opened the 21st Amendment 10 years ago at 563 2nd Street in San Francisco, just 2 blocks from Giants Park, to make great beer and have a great time doing it.
That's right, because to us, the 21st Amendment is more than just the right to make beer. It's the right to experiment, to be innovative, and just do things differently. And so now, we're putting our craft beer in cans.
That's right, cans. You can find our world-famous Hell or High Watermelon Wheat Beer at Brew for Your Die IPA in the Northeast, Northwest, parts of the Midwest, and Alaska in cans and on draft. So next time you're at your local neighborhood pub or good beer store, be sure to ask for 21st Amendment in cans.
Because everyone likes it in the can.
Tasty crack cans.
Tasty crack
can. A few things happened 30 years ago.
ARPANET migrated to TCP/IP, and the Internet was born. Revenge of the Jedi was renamed Return of the Jedi and opened in theaters. Mila Kunis and Emily Blunt were born, beginning a rad fantasy in my mind.
But all of that pales next to the fact that HopTech opened its doors and began blowing homebrewers right out of their mash tuns. HopTech doesn't fuck around. Real people shipping awesome shit straight to you. Their new website is fast and easy to navigate. Or just call 800-379-4677 and let badass bitch Jade and the gadget guy Roberto blow their warm load of customer service all over you. So visit the site or visit the store in Dublin, California and support those that support you. Get your brewing on at hoptech.com.
Hey, my brewing brothers and sisters. This is Jamel Zanishev, and I want to tell you about Heretic Evil Twin. You might be familiar with my homebrew recipe, which uses massive late hopping to create a balance between the malty sweet and the hoppy bitter, along with an outrageous malt and hop character. I wanted a beer with the same bold hop and malt character, so we played around with the homebrew recipe until we were able to make a great commercial version too. We've created a beer rich in malt character, full of caramel, toast, biscuit, and an ever so subtle roast note. On top of that, we piled in an insane amount of Citra and Columbus hops at the end of the boil, as well as in dry hopping. This damn-the-cost approach to hopping gives Heretic's Evil Twin a great blast of citrus and tropical fruit that can't be matched by any other hop. The result is a bold, malty, hoppy, but easy-drinking beer. This is our top seller, our flagship beer, and I couldn't be prouder of it. Cheers.
To find Heretic beers near you, click on Find Some at hereticbrewing.com.
Learning to brew has never been so disgusting. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. We're talking Parti-Gyle Brewing with our good friend Neil Spake. All right, so where were we? We were talking recipes, and really the sky's the limit on this. What other reasons do we have for brewing Parti-Gyle? What is it that is so attractive about this, Neil? I mean, you're a real big proponent.
I am. I don't brew it like every week, but yeah, I'm a pretty big proponent of it. One thing I like, obviously, I'm always conscious about my brew day.
Mm-hmm.
So in a little more than an extra hour, or give or take, I can have 2 beers in the same amount of time on my brew day. To me, that's a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
I get 2 5-gallon beers that are different from not a whole lot extra time. And I do think, just as we alluded to before the break, the blending of these beers really, I think it helps the lower gravity beers by giving them some more character.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take another example. Another place I applied this that I thought worked out tremendously well was a strong Scotch ale and a 60 shilling, because the strong Scotch did some boil reduction. I don't like to do too much of that because I don't want it to get too far, but just that richness that you add to that lower gravity 60 shilling really brings that beer up in its character. Because as you mentioned, the stuff like 60 shilling and English mild can be really watery at times if you're not careful.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of thing really helps to give more character to those low gravity beers in particular. You could, just like we mentioned, I've talked about the Fuller's method, and they're pretty strict about their hopping profiles. But to the home brewer, that's why we do this hobby. Just play with it, hop it differently, whatever you feel like doing. I just think it's just really a fun thing to do. And at the end of the day, you're keeping a very historical brewing process going with new creative ideas, and I just think that's really a cool concept.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, you could even pitch different yeasts.
Absolutely, yeah.
A pack of Cal Ale, a pack of English ale, or a pack of Belgian yeast, a pack of lager yeast, fermented at different temperatures. I mean, you've got a lot of flexibility there.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. Not to mention all the dry hopping options you could use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the math really isn't that hard either.
It's really not that difficult when you think of it as combining these 2 recipes. I think it's much more difficult to just say, okay, here's a mash, figure out what we think the first runnings would be ahead of time, and you just don't worry about that. You know the recipes, you know their gravity potentials, and you add them together, and it makes the math a lot simpler, because even if you're off, this is home brewing. You can't get all upset like, oh, crap, my high-gravity wort was 1058, supposed to be 1060.
Right.
Big deal. Play with the numbers.
Makes almost no difference.
Get it in where you want. Mm-hmm. No, it doesn't. And you're working with the real thing. So when you measure the gravity after it's been chilled, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, at worst, you end up with beer, and then you've learned something. You can use that for next time. Yeah, it's really hard to fault, giving things a try in homebrewing. That's the whole purpose.
Absolutely.
Well, and any other questions, John, for Neil about Parti-Gyle Brewing?
Not that are leaping off the page. I guess, it's interesting to look back at, British beers and historical brewing practice and kind of understand where a lot of today's styles, were influenced by this method. I mean, you mentioned, the Scottish ales, 60, 70 shilling, 80 shilling, as well as the, milds and bitters and so on. And I think I'm intrigued by the fact that, making or splitting the wort and then recombining to get the desired gravities ensures a higher quality wort for the smaller beer than what you would get from simply taking a second runnings or a third runnings and fermenting it.
Right.
So I think that's a good point for listeners to keep in mind is what makes this technique, special and applicable to home brewing.
That was always the thing for me, was the second runnings are always, more tannic, more grainy, thinner.
Yeah.
And the first runnings are always much more rich and full. And, I always was like, well, you blend in a little bit of the second runnings to, cut down the first runnings, but you don't really put the first runnings into the second runnings. So that's an interesting point. Neil, we touched briefly on some of the lower gravity beers, and I see this as something for, the various levels of bitter, just like the various levels of Scottish ale. But I don't, like milds. Did they ever Parti-Gyle mild, or, was that from like a big stout?
Or a porter, I would think. But I think when those started out, they were traditional second running kind of beers.
Well, I thought that like mild back in the day was, not hoppy, and it would be like an 8% not hoppy beer, and they would blend. And it's interesting because there was a lot of blending that went on back then. They would have their mild, they would have their stale, then they'd have their hoppy beer and their stale beer, the one that was sour, and they'd have the one that was mild. They blend the three together in order to get, the proper balance of beer, right?
Yeah, very much so, especially when you bring in the stale, sour elements, especially porters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no doubt that they did that.
Right.
I think some milds were because actually I've seen some Scottish records where it's like a 80 shilling and a Scottish mild written in the notes.
Wow.
And basically the mild is just the second runnings of the 80, and since they're boiled separately, they can hop it however they want.
Okay.
Because they're not blended.
Right.
It's the old style of Parti-Gyling.
Well, and they, back in the day, they'd have the 120 shilling. They'd have they'd have a whole range of these, and that was the tax amount per barrel, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's all just an alcohol level game.
Mm-hmm.
the character and the grist of the beers were almost identical.
It's fascinating, the historical impact on, today's beers. And like you're saying, it's incumbent upon the homebrew crowd, I think, to really not let go of these historical traditions and not lose this information. And we should all be, taking part in preserving this history of brewing.
Definitely.
I totally agree. But it's not for everybody, I'll be honest, but I'm totally with you. There's something to be said for brewing traditions. They developed for a reason, and just like you said, if you ever have the opportunity to walk into a pub in London and order a Chiswick Bitter, which is basically 3.2% alcohol, and taste how much character that beer has, it's like, oh my Lord, why don't we have something like that here?
Right, it's got a lot of malt flavor. Yep. It's got a lot of fair amount of body. It's got the fermentation flavor. It's got the hop flavor. Really well done. And
it's just a beautiful beer.
Yeah, I go over there and I steer for all that sort of thing. There's a lot. Have you been recently and you've seen all the American style beers that are there now?
I have not been recently, but I know that the trend is toward more American beers, and even breweries in the center of England, you're starting to see all of their beers change more to IPAs, and that discourages me a little bit. I understand where they're coming from, but I sure hope these traditional styles don't go by the wayside because of that.
I'm the same way, and I go over there and I'm just like, I appreciate your creativity and the fact that you're brewing American West Coast IPA now, but that's not what I'm here to drink. I'm looking for I want the traditional English, the stuff that I cannot get. It's just
that's right.
kind of frustrating, but it's cool. I'm glad to see. The brewing culture in England is taking on a new life and a new modern twist, and some younger brewers are coming up. Although I've seen some new breweries that are brewing traditional English beers as well. I went to Sambrook, and they had their Wandle. It's the name of a river. Bitter, and they got a medal at like a gold medal at GBBF for bitter, and it's absolutely fantastic.
Wandle, Wandle.
There you go, Wandle, and it's fantastic, and they're a fairly new brewery. I think they've been around maybe I'm just throwing numbers out here, like 10 years or something or less, and. It's excellent, and so I'm really encouraged by that. And then they've got a couple more, modern things, like they were like, oh, we're gonna dry hop something in the cask, and it's all cask beer. Oh, it's fantastic.
Found it 2008.
Yeah,
2008. There you go. So 7 years. See, I'm not that far off. I pay attention to things. Have some brain cells left for memories. But yeah, they're fantastic. And so that encourages me that somebody is still like, well, let's not make all the new stuff that is real popular. Let's just make a really good traditional style. And they do some other things,
absolutely.
But I mean, that just blew me away, and I was very impressed with that. So very cool. Let's take one more break, and when we come back, we'll wrap up with Neil and Parti-Gyle Brewing right after this.
In a world where everything has been lost.
What happened to the city? It's in ruins.
Only one man has the ancient knowledge to restore civilization.
I need a drink. Oh no, the liquor store's been ransacked.
You looking for beer, stranger? Boy, all the liquor got drunk up in the first 25 minutes of the apocalypse.
Wait, there's still some bottles over... Oh, no. Those are non-alcoholic beer.
I reckon you better stick to arrowroot tea and a desperate nomadic existence like the rest of us.
People, I'm a home brewer. I know how to make alcohol. It can't be done. Come with me if you want the beer. Okay, I'm gonna need some big plastic buckets.
He is the chosen one. The prophecies say that he's gonna get us wasted.
Someone start heating water. And
From the creators of Northern Brewer, the people who brought you massive selection and superior customer service, comes the Home Brewer.
Your support of the Brewing Network means everything to us. We couldn't produce shows without you. And we love giving you something extra for that support, like Brew Your Own magazine. You already know it's a great brewing magazine full of recipes, equipment how-tos, discussions of beer styles, and brewing techniques. Whether you're new to brewing and just starting out or you're an old pro, you'll always learn something from the articles in Brew Your Own. Plus, they're amazing special issues like plans for building a Brutus 10 system, 250 classic clone recipes, and the Homebrewer's Answer Book. Brew Your Own magazine and BYO.com are awesome resources for any brewer, whether for yourself or as a gift. When you subscribe or resubscribe from the Brewing Network homepage, you directly support programs like this. Get a great magazine and support the Brewing Network. Subscribe to Brew Your Own right from the BrewingNetwork.com.
Back to the beer guys that make other beer guys look like wine guys. Brew strong.
All right, we're back. You know, one thing that struck me during the break there was
a bumblebee.
Yeah, I jammed an EpiPen into his thigh. He should be all right.
Right. And we'll cover that in the next Jay-Z's Medical Corner. No, I was wondering, Neil, if you wanted to kind of throw out a recipe or you know, some sort of guidelines on a recipe that worked well for you. Mash temperature, ingredients, any sort of thing that you feel tends to work better as a Parti-Gyle versus hasn't worked as well as a Parti-Gyle?
I don't know. I don't really have anything in front of me. But on that topic, obviously you can go back and listen to those awesome Can You Brew It shows for London Pride and ESB, and get some ideas there. The basic bill is 90% Maris Otter with a bit of crystal, about, I think, 7-8%, and then just a touch of chocolate malt. I think keeping it simple does help. I don't think you want something overwhelming, especially for the lower gravity beer. But that's just my personal feeling. But things like more malty styles come through. But there's no reason you couldn't do like a traditional IPA that's, way off the scale and nothing but pale malt. And then get a smaller beer out of that you could just go crazy, late hopping or dry hopping.
Like,
try some different things.
IPA or double IPA and session IPA.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, actually, that is, with the trend going that direction, that'd be a great experiment.
Right.
To try to see if this blending technique actually keeps, because I've had some session IPAs that I thought were indeed a bit watery. And I wonder if this would help that aspect if you did a double or imperial with the other half. Well, no, great suggestion. Well, we're trying.
Right, and you could blend some of that high wort back into the session, and really kind of bolster the mouthfeel and the maltiness.
Yeah, I think it does help because you're also when you're boiling the other wort, you're boiling really high gravity wort, right? So you're going to get a little bit more melanoidins in there. that I think when you combine it with that low-gravity beer that doesn't get as much of that, it really adds character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds good.
And it doesn't, honestly, it doesn't have to be a low-gravity beer either. You could do something like Golden Pride, which is an 8.5% English barley wine, and a standard bitter like London Pride in the same batch, if you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be, the concept that the second beer has to be this 3.5% or less kind of beer. That's not necessarily true. You're just limited by how much your mash tun can handle.
Mm-hmm.
Because it comes down to, what is your system capable of doing?
Well, I think, if people think of it as, imagine you were to just blend either run it all off into one giant kettle, or, you ran off into two kettles and then blended them equally, you'd end up with, 10 gallons or 15 gallons of, 6% beer or whatever. Imagine you could take those runnings, and you could split off a higher gravity portion and a lower gravity portion, and you could pull out 2 beers or 3 beers or 4 beers or however many beers you wanted of varying strengths.
Yeah, and which would really aid you in competitions too, if you want to. If they're not all in the same category, because you could get a lot more beers per entry,
right,
out of just one brew day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and I think this also lends itself well to batch sparging. So, fill up the kettle, drain, or the mash tun, drain it into one kettle, fill it up again, drain it into the next, fill it up again, drain it into the next, and then here's your three worts that you can blend together in whatever fashion and boil, with hops, or you could, boil them all the same hops and then blend them, post boil, post hopping.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yep.
I appreciate you joining us, Neil.
I really appreciate you having me on. Yeah, I've been feeling lonely out here.
Well, you mentioned this like probably a year ago, and I'm like, yeah, great, let's do it. And then I don't know, what happened between then and now. What took us so long? But I guess we're all busy. We're all doing lots of crazy stuff. I don't know if you know, but I went to GBBF this last year, and
awesome.
Hung out there, and would have been great to have you with us.
I would have liked to go on.
For some reason, I didn't mention it to you. I don't know. I completely forgot. I get busy.
Oh, I know.
But it would have been awesome to have you with us. So
I have some friends going this year as well, and I can't make it because of my schedule. But
well,
I'll get there. Believe me, it's on my life list.
If I'm going again, I'll make sure to let you know.
What's it going to depend on?
What? Whether I let them know?
Yeah. No, whether or not you go.
Whether I go?
Yeah.
Time, money. I'm going to Japan and South Korea here in June.
What are you doing in Japan? I asked because the next session episode on Monday is craft beer in Japan.
Yes, I'm going to. There's American beer in Japan events. I'm going to a couple of those. Going with the Victory people, and Mitch from Stone is going, and then I'm taking my daughter with me too, and then we're going to tour around a little bit, and then I've got a bunch of events in Japan. One with some homebrewers. So if you're a homebrewer in Japan, I'm going to be there. We're going to meet and greet and talk and sign and all that stuff.
Don't admit that you're a homebrewer, though, because it's illegal in Japan.
Well, I'm not homebrewing in Japan.
Oh, well, I'm saying, calling all Japanese homebrewers hypothetically.
Right. Uh-huh. And then South Korea, same sort of thing. Going to go out there and get distribution in South Korea as well, and we're going to kind of hang out there and do some stuff. Could be fun.
You moving a lot of beer over there? Just because I'm hearing, that there are a lot of American craft breweries are just gaining a lot of popularity there.
A surprising amount. I mean, it's a drop in the bucket as compared to, what we sell in the U.S. or just, around. We sell a ton of beer around California.
Well, geographically, Japan is a drop in the bucket, footprint-wise, so it stands to reason.
Right,
it's a small place.
So, It's surprising markets that do quite well. Yep. All right. Well, thank you again, Neil. Always wonderful to talk to you, my friend. I miss you. I wish we could hang out some more, but distance, time, and the business of beer is keeping us apart.
Yep.
Thank you.
So I'll see you at NHC for sure.
All right. Oh,
All right.
good. Yeah. Make sure you let me know when you get there so we can I can go buy you a beer.
All right. Awesome.
All right, Neil.
Look forward to it.
See you in San Diego, man.
Thanks, guys.
Later.
He is a good guy. He's very knowledgeable and very generous with his time and knowledge.
Yep. I always like hanging out with him.
Yep. If you'd like to support this kind of wonderful community
service,
yes, I would suggest going to BlickmanEngineering.com and making sure you let them know how much you love that they sponsor this show. Yes, you'll see him at the conference as well. Check them out. They got a great booth there and lots of great people. They're lots of fun. And they would appreciate if you just walked up and said, hey, thank you for sponsoring Brew Strong. We really enjoy the show. Or, hey, thank you for sponsoring Brew Strong. It's really a good waste of my time, or something like that.
I wish I'd never started listening.
Right.
But thanks for sponsoring it.
Right. It's like having a canker sore. It just won't go away. And if you want to keep this canker sore going, I'd suggest going to the Brewing Network .com/store. Buy some goodies there, books, hats, growlers, shirts, whatever. All of it goes to the bottom line and keeps programming like this going. Until then, brew strong, everybody.
Brew strong.